And so it was that on the Ides of Martius, in the chambers beneath the Colosseum, Senator Varro stood over the body of a fallen Murmillo named Calus. A physician sliced the neck with trembling hand, filled a chalice with the steaming lifeblood, and placed it in Lucan's hands. It was murmured behind curtained balconies and over goblets of wine. Did you hear? The boy drank blood and now he walks. But his story, too, is soaked in blood. Let us walk into it, shall we? In truth, Lucan would be dead within the month, but it no longer mattered. What mattered was belief. It was the emperor who first spoke of the blood of gladiators, who mused aloud on its supposed restorative powers. Or is it something more primal, something that lurks in the shadows of our nature? The insatiable hunger for immortality? What is it that drives us to seek out the elixir of life, even if it means sacrificing our humanity? Share your thoughts. Fabius, intrigued, began his research, collecting not just the blood of the valiant, but also of the fearful, the coerced, the innocent. He watched as noble youths drained the ichor of fallen Murmillos, saw their skin bloom with feverish scars, their eyes glaze over with madness. In the shadows, he recorded symptoms, reactions, outcomes, discovering little rhyme or reason in the results. Yet still, he pushed on, for while the elite reveled in taverns of blood, a whisper rose in the alleys, a rumor of a savior. They called him the Blood Man, a mysterious figure who healed the sick with the very essence of the gladiators, taking payment only in blood, rare blood, the blood of those about to die. Soon, Fabius found himself face to face with his past, hunted by centurions and haunted by dreams of Pictish sacrifice. All around him, people drank the blood of gladiators, seeking health, wealth, even immortality. And he, Marcus Fabius Severan, the physician who knew better, became the Blood Man, offering hope and healing with every drop. And so it went a macabre ballet, the clash of steel and flesh beneath the sun-drenched sands, the murmur of dark rituals in moon-choked nights, the desperate prayer that life might conquer death, even if it meant embracing the very darkness it feared. His father, a legionary, his mother, a picked slave. From his sire, he learned lore and Latin, the tools to carve a new life. From his mother, he heard tales of druids and sacrifices under the pale moons. Tales he would later dismiss, or so he told himself. Young Marius followed the road of scholarship, studying under the cloak of night as his comrades slept, dreaming not of conquest, but of cures. Yet even Rome could not hold back the tide of bloodlust forever. When the governor of Britannia demanded human tribute, Fabius felt the old stories rise in his bones, knew he must flee. Disguised as a slave, he rode south. When the ship carrying him touched the Tiber, he left behind the past and embraced the present, taking the name Severanus, becoming a physician to the privileged. His patients, senators, and their ilk were eager to ignore the means by which he gained his knowledge, so long as it brought them relief. And belief in Rome was more dangerous than any blade. Soon, the arena was no longer a place of spectacle alone, it became an apothecary. After each fight, attendants moved quickly, not just to drag the dead, but to collect the blood. Small vials sold in alleys behind temples, in velvet boxes in senatorial homes, the blood of the strong, the fearless, the doomed. It was said that drinking the blood of a gladiator slain in righteous combat could cure epilepsy, mend paralysis, even stir fertility in barren worms. No proof was needed. The image alone, the raw defiance of death in that final heartbeat, was enough to ignite obsession. Yet behind the stone faces of the arena walls, something festered. For not all gladiators died willingly, and not all deaths were honorable. Some were betrayed, some poisoned, some wept in their final moments. Their blood was said to bring not health, but nightmares. A senator named Crassus awoke screaming for days after consuming the blood of Aretarius, who had cursed his name as he fell. His skin turned pale, his eyes hollow. In his final days, he could speak only in a tongue none could understand, guttural, ancient, wrong. Still they drank, still they believed. Even as the bodies piled higher and the souls of the damned whispered through the cobbled streets. At night, it was no longer medicine. It was liturgy, a cult born not from faith, but from fear. The boy drank, and as the blood passed his lips, his body convulsed. For a moment, the trembling stopped. His eyes cleared. He smiled. The miracle spread like fire in dry reeds among the patricians, and in the center of it all stood one man, silent, watching Marcus Fabius of Eerie, a physician not born but made, whose curiosity would unravel Rome itself. Fabius was born in a forgotten corner of the empire, a place where the cold sea met the wild north. One such patient was Marcus Aurelius himself, troubled not by gout or fever, but by insomnia. What brings a man to such desperate measures? Is it ambition, avarice, the lust for power, the smell of rust, the taste of ash? Those are the souvenirs of Rome's greatest glory, its blood and thunder. Here, in this city of marble and myth, the greatest show on earth is still the slow fade. Of life in his youth, he had studied beneath the Stoics, reading scrolls by candlelight while his peers fought for military glory. He had no sword, no shield, but within his hands he held a different weapon, knowledge, sharpened to a point finer than any gladius. They called him the owl in the laurel grove, quiet, observant, eyes to wide, questions to many. He first witnessed the ritual in secret beneath the temple of Asclepius, where the sick came not to pray but to drink. It was there, in the fetid dark, that he saw a boy perhaps 11 press a trembling mouth to the lips of a bowl, still steaming with crimson. Around him stood figures in fine robes, whispering hymns not in Latin, but in something older. The boy drank, the boy screamed, the boy fell still. A cure, they called it. Marcus saw a child convulsing in silence with no gods to answer, but it planted something in him, not faith, not fear, hunger. He began to gather data quietly, methodically. Names of those who drank, names of those who supplied. Conditions improved, yes, but only for a moment. Days, perhaps weeks. Then the rot returned, and with it worse tremors, waking visions. Blood in the eyes. One man claimed he saw the faces of the gladiators he'd consumed, standing over his bed each night, mouths open in wordless screams. Marcus wrote everything down. He called it corpus sanguinis, the blood body, but the Senate would not read it. The physicians would not endorse it. They called him morbid, heretic, enemy of Rome. So he went deeper, into the underground rooms where the blood was harvested, into the pens where gladiators waited to die, into the prisons, the brothels, the graveyards of Rome. There, he met one who changed everything. Her name was Selene, and she was not supposed to exist. She was born of a gladiator and a slave, left for dead in a gutter outside Capua. Raised by the keepers of the Ludi, the training schools for the arena, she knew the sound of steel. Before she knew the sound of her name, she should have died a dozen times in the pit, but she did not. Instead, she killed. They called her Acronia, the woman from the river of woe. Marcus first saw her after she had slain 3 men in a single fight, one with a broken ankle, one with a dagger pulled from her own thigh. She did not smile. She did not speak. She knelt over the fallen, eyes closed as though in prayer. When her blood was collected, Marcus was there. He followed the vial, watched as it was sold to a noblewoman whose child had not spoken since birth. The child drank. The child screamed. And then, at last, the child spoke one word, whispered from lips cracked in ancient Acheron. It was enough. Marcus found her again in the pits, wounded and bound. He bribed the guards, took her to his villa on the edge of Aventini. For weeks, she lay silent, neither friend nor prisoner. Marcus did not touch her. He only asked her questions. What did she see when she fought? She said, "I see the moment before death. It never lies." What did she feel when she killed? She said, "Relief." What did she dream of? She said, "Nothing." The dead don't dream, and yet Marcus noticed something else. Her wounds healed too quickly. Her strength returned too fast. Her eyes never aged. In a moment of madness or clarity, he drew her blood himself. Not for others, for his own study. He drank 1 drop. The visions came at once. He saw the sand of the Colosseum wet with ages of blood, the cries of the slain echoing backwards into the womb of Rome. He saw a city built not on stone but bone, its foundations humming with the voices of the murdered. He saw Selene not as she was, but as something older, something eternal, stepping from the Acheron. Eyes full of time, he awoke screaming. teeth clenched so hard they cracked. Selene was gone, and in her place, a mark scratched into the stone of his wall in blood and soot. The word appeared again and again in his research, Acheron. Not merely the river of the underworld, but a boundary, a border between the living and the dead. And some, it seemed, could walk both shores. What if the gladiators were not merely men but vessels? What if their deaths were not endings but doorways? And what if drinking their blood did not cure the sick, but invite something in? Marcus began his final descent. He stole scrolls from the Sibylline archives. He bribed necromancers in Etruria. He even traveled to the ruins of Carthage, where he was told of a rite older than Rome, older than memory, where the blood of the strong could be used not to heal, but to house. To house what? The answer came too late. Marcus returned to Rome, gaunt, his eyes clouded, his hair gone grey. He wrote a final volume never published, never copied, called De Transmigration Sanguinis, the migration of blood. In it, he claimed the practice had never been about healing, that it had never been about the gladiators. It had always been about those who drank. What passed from blood to blood was not strength. It was memory. It was consciousness. It was hunger. He died the following spring, alone, his tongue chewed to ribbons. They said it was madness, but among his belongings one item remained untouched. A vial of blood, still warm, sealed in black wax, marked with a single word, Selene. Marcus Fabius Severan was not born to blood, but he was drawn to it as iron to magnet, as moth to flame. Rome had always hungered for land, for gold, for gods to adore or destroy. But now, beneath the grandeur of marble columns and triumphal arches, it hungered for something older, something red, not wine, not water, blood. The transformation was not sudden. No one wakes to find an empire changed overnight, but to those who truly looked, it began with the eyes of the people, glassy, unfocused, as if a dream had settled over the city, a slow, sucking trance. And at the center of that dream stood the Colosseum. It no longer echoed with mere applause. Now, after the final blow had been struck and the victor stood panting, the arena fell silent. Then came the cloaked attendants, never speaking, never smiling, stepping over the bodies, gathering the blood in brass bowls etched with strange symbols. The crowd watched in reverent hush, as if witnessing the Eucharist of a new, cruel god. Among the patricians, blood was no longer medicine. It was communion. They called it sanguinem vivorum, the blood of the living. It was served at feasts in small crystal cups, mixed with pomegranate and anise, consumed in sips, never gulps, always warm, always fresh. They said it brought vivid dreams, that one could speak to ancestors, that one could remember things not lived, wars not fought, lovers not kissed, deaths not suffered. The Senate refused to condemn it. Too many drank. Too many whispered of visions, of insights, of clarity sharp enough to flay the soul. Even the Vestal virgins, those untouched by man or time, were rumored to take the blood before their rituals, their lips stained red like painted masks. It was fashion. It was sacred. It was rot. In the slums of Sabur, children began to vanish. At first, a few explained away by famine or thieves, but soon, too many. Screams were heard from old bathhouses at night. Men in dark robes seen carrying bundles toward the banks of the Tiber. They said it was not just gladiators now. The strength of youth had value. The fear of the innocent even more. The people began to whisper of cultus sanguinis, a secret order, born from the ashes of Severan's writings, now walked beyond recognition. Their symbol, a hand gripping a cup, fingers bone white, nails blackened, seen scrawled in blood beneath bridges, behind altars, beneath the foundation stones of villas. And then there was the emperor, Commodus. It was he who brought the fever to full flame. The son of Marcus Aurelius, Commodus was a boy raised on prophecy and steel, a man with delusions of godhood and appetites beyond naming. He did not hide his thirst. He drank openly in the arena after slaying slaves dressed as mythic beasts. He smeared the blood on his chest. He spoke to the crowds not as emperor, but as a god reborn through the blood of men. Through death, I live, he declared. Through blood, I rule. Rome roared. Those who opposed the rites disappeared. Some were crucified, others thrown to beasts. A senator named Gallus attempted to outlaw the trade in blood. His tongue was nailed to the Senate. Dora's warning. His wife was forced to drink from the bowl of a dying boy. Even the physicians fell silent. The College of Medici was split, some fleeing to Greece, others embracing the blood with zeal. They began classifying it, categorizing it. Blood of the champion, bold, clarifying. Good for generals. Blood of the betrayed, unpredictable, used in seances. Blood of the virgin, potent, hallucinogenic. Blood of the condemned, feared, avoided except by those who sought madness. And through all of this, the gladiators, those who bled, were no longer merely slaves. They became saints. Their names were etched into votive walls. Small effigies carved of wax and bone were sold in markets. Miniature gladiators whose mouths were filled with red resin. Children prayed to them. Wives wept before their likenesses, asking for protection, fertility, vengeance. But the gladiators did not pray in return. They had no gods, only rage. In the cells beneath the arena, they whispered of rebellion, not of the body, but of the spirit. That each drop stolen was a chain, that each death fed the enemy. They began to tatter their skin with black ash, ancient glyphs meant to ward off possession. Some sewed their mouths shut before battle, to deny the drinkers their final scream. And in the heart of the blood trade, a figure returned, Selene. They said she walked the corridors of the Colosseum in silence, untouched by blade or flame, that her eyes saw through marble and bone, that she had not aged, that she no longer cast a shadow. Some called her saint, others spectre. She did not speak. She killed, quietly, precisely, those who drank too deeply, those who sold too freely, those who harmed children. They were found, drained, faces twisted in terror, bodies cold yet unspoiled. On their foreheads, always the same mark, a cheron. No one claimed responsibility. No one dared. But whispers spread. The blood had begun to fight back. Even among the elite, cracks began to show. A noblewoman was found floating in her fountain, her mouth full of teeth not her own. A priest tore out his eyes, claiming he had seen the true face of Rome beneath its skin. Children born to blood drinkers were silent, staring, unblinking, watching things others could not see. It was as though the city itself had become haunted by memory not its own. And still the people drank, because hope is the cruelest god of all, and Rome, eternal Rome, had fallen in love with its own reflection in a chalice brimming with blood. Here's a bit of trivia about me. I'm extremely ticklish. And here's another. Every sound effect in this episode of Lore was created by a single individual named Ian. His work has been featured in everything from national news broadcasts to Marvel movies. And now he brings that same level of cinematic quality to our show. When I first heard about Artlist, I was like, okay, well, that's cool. They've got all these stock music tracks. Surely they won't be much use for me. Then I started browsing their sound effects library. It's got nearly 10,000 meticulously recorded sound effects, all completely royalty-free. So, unlike other services where you might find yourself getting sued for using someone else's audio, Artlist gives you unlimited access to their entire catalog. As a result, we've been able to expand the soundscape of Lore, making each scene more immersive and dramatic. And it's really easy to find exactly what I'm looking for. If I type in creepy laugh, for instance, I can narrow that down further by things like whether it's male or female, whether it's meant to be menacing or maniacal. And once I find the perfect track, I can license it directly through Artlist's app, which automatically adds it to my project playlist. This way I can listen offline whenever I need to. You can try it out for yourself for 2 months completely free with any annual subscription. That's just over $3 a month. Go to the website below to get started. By the time the first snowfall touched the rooftops of Rome, the city no longer knew itself. The streets remained, the stones, the statues and senators and salutes. But beneath the surface where history congeals into myth, Rome had become something else. A living, breathing organism fed by sacrifice, pulsing with secrets. The gods of Olympus had long since faded into metaphor. Now, a new pantheon reigned, faceless, blood-soaked, whispered in the dark. And everywhere the signs of change, children born without memory yet fluent in dead languages, twins who spoke only in unison, chanting names never written, women who could smell lies, men who wept blood at sunset. The scholars called it coincidence, the priests called it revelation, but those who drank the true believers knew otherwise. The blood was remembering. You see, the rites had evolved. It was no longer a matter of a sip, a gulp, a symbolic gesture. Now, there were ceremonies, elaborate, choreographed, ancient. It began with the rite of mirrors. At midnight, a supplicant would sit naked before a bowl of still warm blood collected precisely at the moment of death from a gladiator slain without fear. Before drinking, the supplicant would gaze into the blood as into a mirror, chanting a single phrase over and over. Ego Samel. I am he. They said if the ritual was true, if the blood accepted you, you would not simply drink the life of another. You would become them, not in body, but in soul. There were stories, whispers among the elite of men who awoke speaking in strange tongues, walking with unfamiliar gaits, gazing into the eyes of their own wives with puzzled revulsion. Some called it madness, others rebirth. One man, Tribune Elias Castian, was known for his rigid discipline and military perfection. After a ritual, he began to carve battle maps from memory strategies lost for centuries, tactics from wars he had never fought. When questioned, he named himself Drusus of Numantia, a gladiator slain 70 years prior. He did not falter. He wept when he saw his own face in the mirror. The blood had claimed him, and he was not alone. Across Rome, identity began to falter like weak mortar in a crumbling wall. Mothers called their children by wrong names. Senators wept in the forum, forgetting the laws they had written. A playwright named Viridiana awoke one morning and wrote 3 epic tragedies in a single sitting, perfect iambic Latin, unknown to her before. She claimed no authorship. I was only the vessel, she whispered. He needed a tongue. Who was he? None knew, but all feared. Even the Colosseum changed. Where once lions roared and steel clashed for pleasure, now there were rituals of theater. Not fights but sacrifices. Volunteers stepped forward, men and women alike. They offered themselves beneath the moon, blades guided by masked attendants in robes of bone-white linen. As they fell, the crowd did not cheer. They hummed a single, low note, like a prayer to something older than gods. In their final breath, some would speak in voices not their own. Tell my daughter I forgive her. I buried the seal beneath the temple. Not fire again. And then silence. The blood, once a tool, had become a doorway, and through it, something stepped. The first to speak openly of it was the Oracle of Janiculum, an old woman blinded in her youth, now revered for her visions. She was brought before the Senate, carried on a palanquin of cedar wood. Before the gathered elite, she spoke only one sentence: the blood does not give, it remembers. She claimed that Rome had soaked its foundations in so much suffering, so much agony. That memory itself had grown sentient, that the gladiators' deaths ritualized, public, adored had created a resonance, a frequency like a wound kept open too long, that when Romans drank the blood, they were not curing ailments, they were inviting voices in. Souls do not die. She hissed. They cling. They laughed at her, of course, but that night, the temple of Janus burned. Her body was never found. It was around this time that the masks appeared. At first, only the cultists wore them, white ceramic faces with blank eyes, mouths neither smiling nor frowning. But then others began to don them. Nobles at banquets, priests in procession, senators in debate. They said it was symbolic, a gesture of humility, of unity with the dead. But others whispered a darker truth. The masks were not worn to hide the self. They were worn to contain it. For what happens when you drink too deeply? When too many voices fight for dominance within the fragile shell of a single man? What becomes of the ego, battered by memory not its own? It shatters, and in the fragments, something else peers through. It was Selene, always Selene, who stood apart. She walked maskless, her face unchanged by time. When she appeared at the foot of the Palatine Hill, 100 masked nobles bowed without command. They did not speak. They did not rise. She moved among them like smoke, a blade at her side, her eyes filled with impossible sadness. She was not a savior. She was a reckoning. In a letter attributed to the last Saint Vestal, discovered centuries later beneath the ruins of a collapsed bathhouse, she wrote, "Selene is not woman. Selene is what we buried. She walks to remind us we have not atoned. She comes when memory becomes unbearable." Still, the rituals continued. The Senate passed a decree unrecorded, unsigned, allowing blood rites in all public forums. A temple was erected near the Circus Maximus, with a chalice atop a black obelisk said to bleed at dusk. Pilgrims traveled from Gaul, from Syria, from Britannia, offering their veins to taste the Roman miracle. But it was no longer Rome. Rome was gone. What stood in its place was a cathedral of echoes, a palace built of borrowed faces and borrowed souls. And in its sanctum unseen, unsleeping, the blood stirred. For blood is not passive. It waits. It learns. And now it wanted more. They say the end of Rome did not come with fire, nor with invasion, nor famine, but with silence. It began on a clear morning. The kind of morning Rome was built for, light pouring over rooftops like molten gold, the Tiber shining in its curve like a knife in repose. But there were no market cries, no song from temple steps, no clatter of sandals on stone. For 3 days and nights she stood there, arms folded, eyes closed. And when she finally opened them, Rome cracked. It wasn't loud. It was a sound like breath inhaled at once by every wall, every statue, every buried corpse. The air changed, the light shifted, and the blood spoke. No mouth, no language, not in sound, in memory. Every Roman, rich or poor, suddenly saw not visions, but experiences, thousands of lives not their own, pouring through their minds like floodwater through catacombs. They felt sand in their eyes, blades in their bellies, the terror of dying for amusement. They saw their own faces in the crowd, laughing as men were torn apart. The blood showed them, not just death, but what they had become. And in that revelation, many broke. Some fell to their knees, clawing at their flesh as if to strip the memories out. Others walked into the Tiber and did not resurface. Some fell silent forever. But just a few stood tall. They did not scream. They did not flee. They took the memory into themselves, accepted the weight of it. These were the revenants, the last of Rome's true citizens, not because of birth or wealth or virtue, but because they bore the sin and did not flinch. And Selene? She stepped down from the arch, into the Colosseum, into the center of the arena, now cracked and bleeding like flesh. There, she stood barefoot, surrounded by the bones of ages, and she bled. She raised a blade to her own palm and let the blood fall into the earth. No words, no ritual, only memory. And Rome, what was left of it, shuddered. The blood receded, the voices grew quiet, and the city exhaled. The city, for the first time in memory, held its breath. They found the Senate empty, every seat filled, every robe in place, yet no breath moved. The senators sat perfectly still, eyes open, pupils dilated, lips frozen mid-word. Their scrolls unrolled before them, their wax tablets stained with blood not spilled, but wept from their eyes. Not dead, but hollowed. A physician, one of the last who refused the blood, examined their hearts. Each beat faint but wrong, as if out of sync with the world, pulsing to a rhythm not found in nature. He called it pulsus externus. The external pulse, it did not come from within. It came from elsewhere. He would disappear 2 days later. Then came the voices, not in chorus, not in harmony, but scattered broken fragments spoken in streets, in homes, in dreams. A beggar recited an elegy. In Etruscan, eyes rolled back. A child drew maps of cities never built, labeling them with names that reeked of salt and ash. A priestess of Vesta cut out her tongue, whispering before she did, "Too many speak through me." Panic began not with fire, but with repetition. People repeating themselves, phrases looping as if trapped inside a reel. I saw him die, repeated by a baker for 6 hours before she collapsed. Let me out, scrawled in blood across the walls of a senator's atrium by his own hand. While he slept, those who had drunk the most, the nobles, the priests, the masked, were the first to fall. Not in death, but in fracture. They no longer answered to their names. Their faces shifted in the light, as if the blood inside was pushing outward, struggling to remember its former shape. One noblewoman, Lady Calpurnia, laughed for a full day before slicing her cheeks open to reveal what she claimed. With the teeth of the one beneath, even the Colosseum wept. Its walls began to bleed, not metaphor, not exaggeration. Crimson trails from the upper tiers, sticky and slow, smelling of rust and myrrh. It was as if the stone itself remembered the thousand deaths offered upon its altar. And in that memory, it mourned. Selene stood atop its highest arch. She did not speak. She did not move.